us why you want to be the next mayor of Austin.
Well, after 35 years and living here and watching how the town has progressed, and the last 10 years I've been part of the neighborhoods, Austin Neighborhoods Council. So just been dealing with those issues surrounding housing and affordability and all those other things. I've just been very involved. And this last year, honestly, with home and that lack of listening from the council and stuff, that kind of pushed me one way. And then after the budget, then that really kind of just pushed me over the edge. And I had been involved with a group that we were looking for better candidates. And I honestly had no idea. And the last day I woke up, got an email that said a certain person wasn't running, and I said, I can't do this anymore. So I just decided to jump in. I just was kind of fed up and said, this is it.
What about your background you think makes you uniquely qualified to serve as mayor in this particular moment?
Well, and it's funny, I've been asked that question, and I just look at my life experiences. I spent over 20 years in the military, and people go, well, how does that count? And I go, well, that's very political if you've spent time in the military. Many of the jobs that I had to deal with a lot of general officers, but also we had to do a lot of coordination with different organizations. I taught leadership and management for the Air Force, wrote curriculum for them for upper level management. So I just kind of look at the overall package. I'm a small business owner. I know what it's like to run a business. I know what it's like to have to deal with code issues here, trying to get permits. And so I kind of probably bring in a different perspective to it. I'm not a politician, but I'm not afraid to say no and ask the questions. Why are we really doing this? What is the reasons? Where's the data? So I just, that's my qualifications.
You know, among the issues that are impacting the people here in Austin, I think one of the main ones is water.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Austin has had challenges in managing its water and ensuring that people always have access to water. What would you do as a mayor to ensure that the water, that we have enough water and that it's good water quality both now and for in the future?
Well, being a guy that worked in civil engineering for the Air Force, infrastructure was one of the things that we actually concentrated on. I actually did time, even working for large construction companies, infrastructure was always part of it. I've been following this issue for the last several years, especially when they first said we were leaking 7 billion gallons of water. And then this year we just got the report that said we're leaking 8 billion gallons. One of the things that I would like to do is actually get with the utilities portion of Austin, of City of Austin, and go, well, what is your plan? Where's the transparency? How many water lines are we looking at replacing? Do we have enough crews? Because they just recently added on another crew also in the budget for fixing water mains and the breaks and those type of things. So it's trying to understand what is the game plan, and do we need to start maybe shifting some emphasis towards our infrastructure, especially on water, versus maybe some of the other things that they're looking at. Because let's face it, I was asked at a neighborhood forum, what's your biggest environmental? And I said water. I said, because if we don't have water, it doesn't matter what the rest of the environment is doing. We can't live here. So water is a main emphasis for me in just trying to make sure where we're going and how are we going to get there and what is our timeline, and see if we can speed that whole process up.
When we think about the affordability crisis that people in Austin are facing, obviously the first thing that people think about is housing.
Right.
But it's not new, right?
No.
We've been hearing about the need for more housing supply for years and years and years. How can the city truly move the needle on impacting housing in Austin?
Well, being somebody that does building, and now I do small projects, I do some remodels, I do some project management, that type of stuff. There's only certain things the city can actually control. And I said this the other day, the city cannot control the cost of materials. They cannot control the cost of labor, because labor is based upon what it costs to live here. But there are some issues that we may be able to look at, such as the permitting process. And I realize that they've just recently gone through an audit, so to speak, or it wasn't really an audit, it was a way of saying, okay, what can they do better? Maybe speed that process up a little bit. I did a permit last year, and it took 12 weeks just to get a permit to add a porch onto a house. Well, in that time frame, the price of materials more than doubled because of COVID, and we ended up having to pull back. Now, was it the delay that caused part of that? COVID caused the increase in the materials, but it shouldn't take you 12 weeks to get a permit to build a porch on an existing deck. And I know that there are people out there waiting on, and let me say this, I sat on the Board of Adjustments for the City of Austin, and last Monday night, or this past Monday night, we looked at a case for somebody, and they had been working on trying to get a change to do a building for their handicapped son for well over a year. There's no reason for that to take that long. How does that impact affordability? Every time you wait, it's just costing more and more money to change. It's costing more and more money for that to wait that whole process out. How good are your bids? All of the other things. But I think also we need to start looking at maybe for seniors, locking in some of their fees for utilities, that we have that service fee that we have to pay. Maybe we could start capping those for seniors to help keep that from rising up. Not waiting 7 years to increase our water rates, which they've done the last time. I'd rather pay a little bit every year than get hit with a big water rate at the end of 7 years.
You're jumping ahead and talking about fees. That's on my list of things for us to talk about. When we think about housing and increasing housing supply, obviously the council passed the home initiative.
Right.
Thoughts on the home initiative from someone who, look at you smiling. Thoughts on the home initiative from someone who took issue with Code Next?
Well, myself, along with probably about 10 other people from Austin Neighborhoods Council and a couple other, we all met with many of the council members. We had several of those people also meet with the Planning Commission, providing them with areas that we felt could be changed, areas that needed to be excluded because of flooding, whatever the case was. Every one of those that we met with said, this was prior to December 7th, this was several days before, said, our minds are made up. We're voting for this. So on December 7th, when I went down there to speak, along with nearly 1,000 other people, I was talking to two people, Mackenzie Kelly and Councilman Alter, Allison Alter, not Ryan, and then the people behind us. But I had issues. My issues weren't so much, I'm a property rights advocate. I think you should be able to deal with your property. My concern was the impacts on what people were being told versus what was in actuality. They said this was affordable. They took that out. They stripped it out. They say you could go build. Yes, you could still build, but they were telling them, oh, this would be a cheap way to do this. They weren't talking about the impact fees. They weren't talking about what it was going to cost to do a sewer tap or do a water tap. All of those things that people weren't being told as to what the initial cost was in this. And I was also very concerned about the fire issue, the safety issues for fire, because the fire department has to have so much, be able to get to them, but there also needs to be so much clearance based upon previous projects that I've worked with. So my concern was that they weren't being truthful, they weren't being transparent, and they were just leading people to say this was going to be a solution. And to this day, we're seeing things coming before the Board of Adjustments that people are going, well, we're doing this not because of home. We don't want to have to deal with that portion. We'd rather deal with it under the existing code as it is, those issues.
Now, the existing code has been sort of a thorn in the side of some leaders in Austin for a long time, and there's been a long talk of a need for a rewrite. That was going to be Code Next before we got to the home initiative. You were a part of the lawsuit to stop the Code Next implementation.
No, I was part of a lawsuit that we sued with 12 more people based upon they were taking away our right to protest.
Right, how they were going to how they were trying to implement to vote for Code Next.
Correct.
For you, was it about the content of Code Next, or was it just about the way that it was being done?
It was about property rights. It was about protest rights and notification. That was my concern, because they honestly, when they were doing Code Next, they were not listening to the community. We spent $8 million and they were not listening. Some of the new changes that they've done are actually worse than what Code Next actually was. So it was strictly the fact that they had not even talked to the tree people. They had not even talked to watershed on how this was going to impact our flooding, those type of issues. But the main thing for me was they just ignored. They said you didn't have protest rights and you weren't going to get notification. And that's when Mr. Becker and the other group said, bring it on, let's go.
So then we got home, right?
Yeah, then we got home.
So then we got home. So you've kind of alluded to some of your issues with home. What do you think is missing from home? What do you think we actually need?
Well, now, one of the things with home is they really didn't change the tree ordinance, but as I said in my presentation at there, I said, so what's going to be more important, the trees or building a small unit in your backyard? There has to be a blend. And what we found out on Monday night at the Board of Adjustments was that even some of the code that they were supposed to be in changes, they have not made those changes yet. And so they've pushed this through, but there has not been any follow-up to it. There's going to be issues when it comes to our infrastructure. Do we have the water? Do we have the sewer? Do we have the electric to be able to do these, to add these units on a piece of property? If somebody wants, honestly, like I said, I'm a property rights guy. If you want to do that to your property, you can do that, but you need to be able to do it within the limits. The other issue I have with it was when they said your deed restrictions would protect you. Well, that may be true, the deed restrictions are there, but that only protects you if you're willing to go sue whoever that is that's going to build next to you that's violating those deed restrictions. The city has no involvement with that. So once again, they weren't being very truthful. They were just saying this would protect you, and in actuality, an individual would have to go sue somebody else to make sure that that was being done.
You know, housing is just one part of affordability. You kind of started to allude to the fee structure that we have. You have people in Austin having to pay significantly more for utilities and services, and that wasn't always the case. That those things used to be funded through growth. That's how the city council, the thought process was. What do you think has led to this change?
Well, and watching over the years, I find it that there are times that something will happen and the council doesn't know about it until after the fact. If you remember a couple of years ago, there was a big spike at Austin Energy and they were, what was it, $11 million, $12 million in the hole. It was there was a great big deficit. And the next thing you know, the Utilities Commission was going, we're just now learning about this. So I look at it as, where's the transparency? Why are you people not understanding that these are happening? So somebody's not doing some communications. When I talked to the water director when they were doing their presentations around town because they wanted money for adding on to the sewage treatment plant, and they were going to raise the rates because they hadn't done it 7 years. I talked to the director, and the funny part is that we connected because I had been deployed to his country of Egypt many, many years ago and said, I understand how valuable water is after living in several different countries. And I said, I would rather have that small increase versus the big one. So why are we not being very truthful with people and going, we need to raise our rates in accordance with what kind of cost we've increased versus holding it out for several years and then hitting you all at once. That's a little more affordable to me, especially somebody that's on a fixed income with my military retirement, not counting that part, but it makes it a little bit more easier to digest versus getting hit with what they showed in the budget this year of almost $360 increase over the year.
Let's talk about homelessness. The number of people experiencing homelessness in Austin is rapidly increasing.
Yes, ma'am.
Some 5,000 estimated by ECHO to be homeless, another 1,200 in shelters. We often hear people say we need to end homelessness. We're going to end homelessness, but that is a very hard thing to measure. What metric would you use to grade your success at addressing homelessness in Austin?
What I would count as being successful is if we could get everybody out of the green space, if we could get everybody out of the woods, I would consider that to be successful, because we do not, that's an environmental issue of anybody living in the green belts. I would consider that successful if we could achieve that, because it's, like I said, it's not only an environmental issue, it's a safety issue for those that live next to the green belts, the homeless that would be living in the green belts. I would consider that a success if we could eliminate that. We're never going to eliminate the homelessness. I mean, I try to be a realist. I think we need to concentrate on the programs that work. The ones that are not working, we really need to dive deep into those and find out why are they not working. What can we do to get those more efficient to work? The taxpayers are basically, most of them I talk to, they're tired. They're tired of not seeing a lot of drastic changes. I even talked to an officer on Tuesday night, and he said, my biggest concern and the other officers is having to deal with those with mental issues. And a lot of that is with the homeless.
You talk about the programs that are not successful.
Okay.
Give me some examples of programs that are not successful at addressing homelessness.
Well, I guess when you want to talk about whether they're successful or not, you know, they just recently had the case about the marshalling yard, and that caused kind of a controversy. It's supposed to be like an emergency shelter. So what is it being successful and having a place for them to go to? I guess the proof is going to be as to what are the results of how they're getting those people out of that into the others. But I also, there are so many different programs out there that I think it's very hard for most Austinites to understand how many programs are out there dealing with it. You just got through talking about there was 5,300 whatever. They told us last night at the other debate, they said that the latest number they got was 5,335, something like that. When I asked one of the people from the homeless office earlier in the year, can you give me the number of people that are actually homeless at this point in time? And it was after the point in time count. And the individual that worked for the city, he says, I can't. And I just said, why not? You're in the homeless office, you're one of the main persons doing this. You should be able to, within a couple of hundred, say, we have this many. And he could not give me an accurate number. So I really think part of it, and I realize they've had some changes in their office now, but I would consider that to be not very good information for those that are asking and very interested in how well the program is working. The other ones, community foundations, they've got some very good models. They've been working. They work because they've got some rules in place. Some of the others, people have come in, look at some of the housing that we've done with some of the hotels that they've done, tearing them up. They recently had a controversy about somebody that did a whistleblower type thing in those. So to give you an exact point and say, oh, this one's not working, it may be working for some people, but it's not working for others. And that, I think, is where some of the transparency needs to come from. Concentrate on the ones that are working well, what's not working, modify, take good examples that are working and see what you can implement into those other ones. And most of those you'll find that there's some type of structure, there's some type of rules. So I just think there are issues that need to be addressed throughout the entire program. And I don't think the city's doing a very good job of that.
One of our viewers, C. Goodwin, who lives in Southwest Austin, wants to know how you would specifically address mental health treatment and drug addiction and rehab within the homeless community if you're elected mayor.
Okay. Well, I would specifically like to see in fact, they just opened up a center, I understand, today that's dedicated strictly to dealing with people with some type of drug addictions and also some other mental issues. That's part of this homeless thing. But I would love to get the state involved, since the state hospital is now open, get the county involved, because this is not just Austin's problem. This is a state, this is a county issue, and really worked very hard to get enough people to be able to provide those services that are needed for those people that need the help. When you're talking about specifics, I think there's going to be certain people have different addictions. They need certain other types of treatments. Now, whether or not they're willing to go through those treatments, that makes it very difficult. But I would incorporate the city, the state, and the county all together, trying to pool our resources to be able to try to come up with a good solution.
When we think about ways to combat the affordability crisis in Austin, we cannot forget about transportation. Yep. And Austinites recognized the transportation challenges when they approved Project Connect, and yet what they voted for is not what they are going to get. What would you do as mayor to help restore some of the public confidence in Project Connect?
Well, I served on the Project Connect Ambassadors Network, which was a project, and I represented the neighborhoods that was leading up to the vote. And I did see, being a construction guy, seeing that I don't see how you guys can build this for this kind of money, and then the numbers came out of sight. What I would really like to push is, while we're getting through this train issue, is that the pickup service that Capital Metro has instituted, I would like to see that whole process get speeded up versus it taking so long to analyze and move into different neighborhoods. I'd like to see that go through. I'd also like to see an on-demand service that meant that there are several smaller cities across the U.S. using, which I think would be very helpful, especially for those that are elderly, that can't walk or can't get to the bus stop, whatever the case is. And I'd also like to see, even though we spent $255 million on electric buses to a company that went bankrupt, then put other buses in service to get those routes up and running, and then we can infill as we go. There's no reason for us to be sitting back waiting like on the Pleasant Valley run that they're talking about. That's supposed to be done with electric buses. So why can't we do it with regular buses for the time being? So I would like to concentrate on that while the rest of this is being done. I am not anti-transit, and several have labeled me as anti-transit. I am not anti-transit. We need good public transit in this town. And it's not for everybody, but it does need to be there for those. We need to get to that 50% that they're talking about. The only way we can do that is by having good transit that fits the needs of the people using it.
Do you see an issue with the funding mechanism for Project Connect going through the Austin Transit Partnership? Talk to us about that.
One of the things that I see is that this is a permanent tax. It's a permanent property tax. Being somebody that was speaking out against and saying, where's the transparency on this? The issue, once again, is the lack of transparency even from ATP. Being involved with them as that part of that ambassador network was when they would ask us to look at things that they were fixing to do presentations on, and we found areas we needed to, they just went ahead and proceeded on their own. The fact that people still believe that this is a bond and it's not a permanent tax, that makes an issue. One of the things I would really like to see is that on our tax statements, like where the county has central health as a separate line item, ATP, Project Connect, should be a separate line item on there so that people can see what portion of their property taxes is actually going to that process. Because we also pay a sales tax that helps fund, Capital Metro. So the transparency and the accountability, because they're taking operations and maintenance funds and trying to use that to build a system. That's why they're in court now, is over that process.
Let's talk about public safety.
Okay.
When people call 911, they want a police officer to come out to them, whether it's they're having a car crash or their home has been burglarized. But that's not always what's happening right now with Austin police.
It's true.
How do you address that?
As one of those that has called when my truck got broken into, my tools got stolen, as somebody that was hit by a drunk driver at 2:15 in the afternoon on Brody Lane one day, and had to wait roughly 25 minutes. Thank God the guy just sat in the HEB parking lot and decided to sleep part of it off, and he was arrested. There are major concerns. There are major concerns for me. We need to be filling those positions. One of the questions for me has been, was there ever any real exiting polls or exiting surveys done of those that were leaving the department that weren't retiring? Why were you leaving? We need to fill those gaps. And it's not that I feel for the officers. I understand. We all go and do certain jobs that others will not do. I mean, I spent 20 years in the military and being sent to different places, and not everybody wants to do that. We need to, at least our 911 is back up to full capacity, but now we need to be working to fill those candidate slots with new cadets, with other people that want to come to Austin with that contract. We just need to make sure that all of the neighborhoods and all of the outskirt areas are being served by the number of officers they're supposed to be, versus only having 1 or 2 officers on patrol at night, because we've been having a lot of issues with that. Then they recently had a shooting in one part, and I think 5 officers were involved in the whole, not so much in the shooting, but they were involved in the incident, but they were then put on desk duty, and they didn't have very many officers to fill back in for that area. So that area was short. I understand that is the police chief's duties to be dealing with that and making sure officers are moved around, but we need to make sure we have enough officers to make sure that we're meeting the demands of our citizens.
So what would you do to ensure that we don't see another shortage, the type of that we're seeing right now with, more than 300 positions being vacant if you're elected mayor?
I'd honestly would like to work with the, what I've recently heard is, as a retired officer said, the toxic environment. We really need to be, the center core, I think everybody can pretty much understand and get along and have communications. We have those that really can't, and maybe we just need to be working on toning that down and trying to understand what are those concerns that they have. Are they valid concerns? They probably are from their perspective, but getting everybody else to understand from both sides how important it is that we have to have that. I've lived in third world countries to where I don't want to go back to that situation. I don't want to see people standing on the corner with a semi-automatic weapon like I saw in Cairo, Egypt, or in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, because that was their protection. I don't want to see that in this country. So we need to make sure that we are having open, honest, candid discussions and be able to work through these situations. What is it that, I understand you have a need, and maybe you don't feel like you need police, but there are certain people in your neighborhood that feel like we need to have the police. We just need to be able to sit down, work this out, and have those candid conversations and understand the feelings on both sides.
A question from one of our viewers. Jose from South Austin wants to know why you think Austinites should not re-elect Mayor Watson.
I'll be honest with you. I'm not somebody that's going to sit up here and I think his record probably speaks for himself. I think the citizens can make up their own decision on that. I've voiced my concerns on what I've had my dealings with in this area. That is up to each individual to make up their own mind. Do you want 4 more years of what you've had for the past 2 years? How much inflow that he had from the past 8 years from the previous mayor? Only they can make up their minds what they see as important and what are the issues. I'm glad somebody's asking the question, because at least they're trying to get involved. And I do believe there's a lack of involvement with the majority of our citizens here. And they just basically, because of not either wanting to or too busy, they just get confused on it, on all the different issues. that's an interesting question. They can pick and choose. It's no different when somebody says, well, picking this candidate over this candidate, or going back to what we had. Their own personal beliefs and hopefully their own thought process will help them determine, do I want to do this again, or do I want to move forward with something else? Because there is 11 people up there. There's not just one, there's 11.
If you're elected mayor, at the end of that first 4-year term, what is one tangible thing that you would want to be different in the city?
I go back to one of the tangible things I want to see. I'd love to see an audit. I want an audit of the entire city so that we know exactly where the money is being spent, what programs are working, what's not, what are the issues that, and be very transparent about it so that the taxpayers know exactly, okay, we've saved this much money, or this is going to have to go to fixing the infrastructure. I'd like to see true transparency, true accountability, and I would like to see a complete audit of the city. And it take 5 years is what I'm wanting to dedicate it to.
Beyond the audits that are done from the city auditor's office.
That's outside. I want an outside audit. I do not want the city's audit, the internal city auditors to be, they may be there just to kind of watch, but they're doing mostly anything that's kind of an internal within personnel, whatever the case is, those type of things. I'm talking about budget items. I'm talking about just how the whole process is run, what can be changed, what's not working, what is working.
That sounds expensive.
Well, they several years ago they put it on the ballot and they said, oh, it's going to cost $5 million. We just got notified that Development Services wants $10 million to go count trees. So here's the question. How do you know what you're not going to save unless you don't try? But I would rather see a small amount of money put into the budget that does audit from an external thing. You do one of the big departments, whether it be transportation, water, electricity, whatever, and then several small departments. The next year you do the same process with different departments, but what we learn here, and then as we start seeing other things coming out, those could be implemented, and that gives us a chance to do a complete throughout the entire system. It's never been done in Austin by an external auditor. What is the difference between a major corporation that has to be audited based upon what their shareholders want versus the city of Austin? There is no difference. You and I are the shareholders. The council and the mayor are the board of directors. They're directing the CEO. The council is accountable to the citizens. There again, what was on that ballot I guess it was 5 years ago or so? Could anybody really tell you that no didn't mean yes and yes didn't mean no? It just started off with $5 million to spend for an audit. Didn't tell you about any savings, didn't tell you about, okay, do you want to spend $5 million for an audit, or you're telling me it's going to cost us $5 million? Clear, concise English, language, some type of written, so that everybody understands exactly what's there and what is the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to find what may be working and what's not working. They should be accountable.
Give our viewers some final thoughts on why they should elect you this November.
Well, I'm not a politician. I'm not afraid to say no. And I'm not afraid to tell somebody, I'm sorry, you may not be able to get what it is that you're particularly wanting. You need to really justify the needs. But I think one of the things about it is that I want to make sure that there's good communications and that there's actually somebody asking the tough questions. Because in many cases, now I'm not there for the meetings in the council and some of the other things, but at some point, the questions need to be asked to whether or not is this really the right response? Is this fitting all of our needs? How does this fit into the long-term goals? Those type of questions need to be asked, and understanding really how the whole process actually works, getting more people involved. Because I know they've been shut down for so long that it makes it very difficult to get people to be re-engaged in the process, and they need to be involved in the process. And maybe they're just looking for something different, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. You know, you can ask for their vote. Maybe it's, well, maybe they're more about what's in here versus what's in here, and thinking about how this all affects us. Because as many of us get older, our attitudes start changing about how does this affect my kids, how does this affect my grandkids, how does this affect my neighbors, those things, versus just saying how is it affecting me. I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for the fact of saying I think I can make a difference, and being one of the voices for those that really haven't had a voice lately, and be willing to listen. I will return a phone call or return an email, hopefully within 24 hours to 48 hours if somebody asks me a question. It may not be the answer you want to hear, but at least somebody's going to get back to you, or say, we're getting back to you, we're trying to do some more research, whatever the case is. I find that to be very lacking. I realize we're the 11th largest city, but there needs to be a voice of reason in some regards, and there needs to be a change at some point. So that's it. So I'm running to be a change, to be a different voice, not just a grumpy old man out there in the audience speaking to city council for 2 minutes and going, this is not working, guys, we need to work, and them just still sitting there playing on their phones, looking at text messages, whatever. They need to be paying attention, be present, be the civil servants that they are. And I've been a civil servant for many years, and then been on my own, and I have to always deal with my customers. The citizens out there are no different. They're a customer. They're a customer of those people sitting on the dais, and they need to be accountable.